Faith Shared has helped churches big and small from across the UK and Ireland bring together their church families to explore how they can best share faith with their communities. Plus, it's totally free, so click the link to start your Faith Shared journey today.
Good evening and a very warm welcome to this Faith Shared webinar. Thank you for joining us. This evening we're going to be exploring ideas around how to connect with the community around your church, and to do that we're going to be talking a little bit about, quite a lot actually, about this resource from Church Army called Faith Shared. It's great to great to have you with us. My name's Johnny and I am the Church Resource Officer for Church Army. So that means I help and put together, write and curate resources that help churches put mission and evangelism at the centre of what they do and really help them to make that a part of their everyday life. And obviously I'm joined here by Beth. Beth, who are you?
Hi, my name's Beth Burris. I am a tutor on the training team with Church Army. So I teach evangelism, mission, theology, all sorts of things to the trainee evangelists that we have. I'm based in Sheffield. The sun is in and out behind the clouds, but at least it's warming up. I'm pleased about that. We'd love to hear where you're joining us from. If you're on YouTube, then you can see on the bottom of the screen there. If you're logged in, then you can give us a comment. So please do tell us where you are and where you're joining us from. It'd be lovely to see the kind of far and wide participants that we've got tonight. So yeah, as Johnny said, we're going to go through Faith Shared and what it is, who it's for, why we've come up with it, and then how does it work. But before we start, I'm just going to pray for us. Heavenly Father, thank you for the opportunity to gather in this way this evening. We ask that you would be with us by your Spirit. Thank you that we are united wherever we are joining from around the world. Lord, would you ignite our hearts with a passion for your mission, and would you help our churches to reach out to the communities that we love. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Wow. Wonderful. I can see that we've got some people. Debbie in the Forest of Dean. Hi, Debbie. Do keep commenting if you're joining us on YouTube. But I'll hand over, I think, to Johnny to kick us off.
Fab. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about what Faith Shared actually is. And Faith Shared is part of a group of resources that we have been developing at Church Army. It involves Faith Pictures, Faith Shared, Faith Empowered. And Faith Shared is, of course, you'll have seen from the short trailer we showed at the beginning, but it's a 6-session course which is aimed at helping churches to think through how to reach out to their community, but also why they should do that. And it aims to do this by creating a space to reflect on various different things. So first of all, it asks for participants to think through what drew them to be part of their church, where they already present, and they can share God's love. You know, what spaces are they already active in their everyday lives that they can share God's love, and then how, as a group, they can work together to draw others to their church. As I said, it's 6 sessions, and I'm just going to run through what those 6 sessions are and what each session focuses on a little bit. And so this first session is called What is Evangelism? And what is evangelism? It's about helping the group to think about their own experiences of evangelism, both positive and negative, and how we can engage afresh with this idea of evangelism. How can we almost reclaim evangelism from some of the negative ideas that are associated with it, both in the church and outside the church, and really engage with it positively? Session 2 asks, what is your story? It says this, so, and this session borrows from Faith Pictures, which I've already mentioned. Faith Pictures is a resource for helping individual Christians to think through their own story of faith and how they can start to share their faith. So yeah, this session draws on some of that and helps. It really gives space for us to sit back and reflect on where God has been present in our lives. I think a lot of the time we can all get really busy, just cracking on with life, just going about doing things, and actually taking the time to step back and see where has God been present and active can be really tricky sometimes. And because we don't spend the time sitting back and reflecting, when it comes to talking about our faith, we can sort of think, oh, I don't have anything to share. I don't know where God's been present. So actually, this is about giving space and time for us to have that space so that we can have those stories to share. Session 3 is then where and how can you share your story? Now, evangelism and outreach doesn't mean that we have to fill our diary with extra events and activities. It doesn't mean we have to suddenly cram our weeks full of things where we're sort of suddenly inviting people into our church space. But actually, we need to think about those spaces in our lives where we're already present, where people already quite like us, where we're already, we've already got some credibility, actually. And thinking about how we can open our eyes to see what God's doing and how we can join in with what he's doing in our everyday lives. Session 4 is possibly my favorite part, and this is called Jesus' story. And this really asks us to step back for a moment and say, ask ourselves, what is it about Jesus that captivates us? What was it about Jesus that captivated us in the first place? Why do we choose to follow him rather than anyone else? And it asks these questions in a sort of slightly different and unusual way that makes us try and see it with fresh eyes. So actually it asks the question quite bluntly, as Christians, what problem does Jesus solve? And depending on our perspective, we can give quite different answers. So, for example, I was having this conversation with a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, and I asked them this question, and we started having a conversation about this. And for them, the problems that Jesus solved were very personal and close to them, and very much about their life and the things that they had going on. And that's a great answer. That's a fantastic answer. You know, we really love to see where God works in people's lives to really step in and change them in those ways and help them in those ways. Whereas for me, it was about taking a step back and seeing, well, there's this wider thing that's going on in the world, this wider thing that God is doing in the world. And Jesus is how he has taken steps to start to change things. And so actually that's the problem. Those are the problems that Jesus solves. And so we had these different answers, but they're just different perspectives on the same thing. So we can start to sort of see these things afresh and try and get a new perspective. And then we can start to think about, well, how does that have an impact on how we should share the good news of Jesus? Session 5 is, how does your church invite people to be part of its story? And in this session, we start to think practically about the way your church can reach out to your local community. And to give us a framework to do this, we start to use the 5 marks of mission. And it's about thinking about what those 5 marks are and which of them we engage with more, which we engage with less. How do we start to try and engage with the ones that we maybe like less, we struggle to engage with a bit more, and start to really try and have a really well-rounded view of the things that we do to reach out to reach out to our community. And then session 6, finally, thinks about ideas for outreach. And again, this is thinking even more practically than that last session. And what it tries to do is help put together a really practical, sustainable plan for over the course of a year for creating spaces where you as a church reach out and connect with the people around you. So my background is in local church work. And I know that what can happen within local church work is that you can start to work towards some mission and outreach events, and everyone's enthusiastic about it and everyone's really fired up for it. And you're working on it for a few months and people get a bit less enthusiastic. And actually, by the time you get to the mission and outreach, it's a relief to be on the other side of it. So what happens is, you've built momentum and you've had a great time at this event. And actually afterwards, everyone sort of goes, oh, it's over, we can breathe now. And you sort of, maybe those connections that you've made, you start to lose them. Maybe some momentum that you've built in creating connections in the wider community can start to be lost. And what we want to do is help build a sustainable pattern to this. So not big events, really practical things, really things that can be repeated, but things that really give opportunities for connection. So that's the course, 6 sessions, those 6 sessions. And in a moment, we're going to watch the video from session 1. We'll talk a little bit more about the things that make up the session, the different parts of the resource. But for the moment, we're going to watch the video from session 1 with the wonderful Ellie.
What comes to mind when you think about the word evangelism? What images do you associate with it in your mind? It could be experiences that you've had of doing evangelism. It could be evangelism that people have done to you, or it could just be ideas that you've picked up along the way. But we shouldn't necessarily let our own experience of evangelism get in the way of what it really means. When we're thinking about what evangelism is, it can help us to go back to the word evangelistes. That's the Greek that we get our word evangelist from. Now, you may have spotted the word angel in the middle of evangelist and evangelistes, and you would be absolutely right to make that connection. An angel is a messenger, and when the news that they bring is from God, that is good news. So an evangelist is someone who shares good news from God. But why should we want to be evangelists? Why should we want to share that good news with people? Well, if we go to the Bible, in Matthew 28, Jesus says to his disciples, "Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit." Now, those disciples were being encouraged not to keep the good news to themselves, but to share it with all nations, with the whole world. And that's what we can do as well. Share that good news with our friends, our families, our communities. And in Jewish thought, there's a word for this, shalom. Now, we often translate that to mean peace, but there's a deeper meaning to shalom than that. It talks about the wholeness and oneness that we have when we accept God's love for ourselves. And that's what we can be sharing with people. I want you to think about your friends and your family, your communities, what difference it would make to them to know that wholeness and oneness with God.
Great. So that's the brilliant Ellie there talking about what is evangelism in session 1. And I hope that gives you a flavour of how we're trying to see evangelism afresh as this sharing of shalom and peace with the world around us. Slightly more practically, the resource is usable both digitally and in person. And it, so it can be used by, in a setting like this or in a Zoom meeting, or it can be used in person. The whole idea of it has been written. It was started being written before lockdown and then has been completed during lockdown. So that's been very much at the forefront of our minds as we've been developing this. And everything you need to engage with the resource is available on the Church Army website. So if you go to the Church Army page under Resources Toolkit, you'll find everything. And there's the link just below. So Beth is now going to talk a little bit about who Faith Shared is for.
Fabulous. Thanks, Johnny. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, you've just seen on the bottom of the screen there. If you're just joining us, welcome. Do tell us in the comments where you're joining us from, and do be writing any questions that you have along the way. We're going to have a section at the end where we consider your questions, a bit of Q&A. So do be writing those in the comments as we go. But as Johnny said, who is Faith Shared for? Faith Shared is primarily for use by a church leader or a group of church leaders, a church leader who has pulled together the key people from their congregation or their congregations. And it is aimed at helping to provide that framework for them to reflect on their own personal faith and their own journey of faith sharing, and then to lead that group into making decisions about how the church or the small group can reach out as a community. So it could be used by one church, it could be used across a benefice or a team ministry, or even an ecumenical group of churches, a churches together group, perhaps in a town, a village or city. And the other thing to mention about who it's for is that the way it's been designed is that it doesn't assume a particular theology or tradition. We hope that it is accessible across the breadth of our churches, and so we really hope that that anyone can access it and that it will be usable by people from churches across the different traditions represented. So now we're just going to zoom out a little bit and consider why Faith Shared. Why did Johnny and others at Church Army come up with this resource? What's the purpose for it, I suppose? And I'll start by saying that when we say yes to Jesus, whether we know it or not, we're also choosing to say yes to something that is bigger than ourselves. We're saying yes to being part of what God is doing in the world. And a key part of what God does in the world, as we know, is the church, is through his church, us being his body here. And we at Church Army, we want to help churches to reflect on and plan for outreach, mission and evangelism that is effective, that is sustainable, as Johnny was saying before, and which offers others the chance to say yes to Jesus and to become part of his people in the world, to join his church. Having been involved in church and church work for many years, Church Army understands a bit of the challenges that can arise when putting together plans for outreach and evangelism. And so we wanted to help create that framework that supports you, that supports churches in both motivating and planning for these sorts of outreach events or ongoing patterns of mission and evangelism, and to encourage us all that we have an important part to play in mission and evangelism. That's what makes us tick as Church Army. That's who we are, and so it's our joy to share these resources with you. Do keep asking bringing your comments and questions in the chat there. But I'm going to hand over to Johnny to consider how it works. And I think to do this, I'm going to share my screen. So there we go. So this is the website. And Johnny's going to talk us through what we can see there, and I'm going to be the mouse.
Great. So we are, we're going to talk about how Faith Shared works a little bit. And just if we scroll down a little bit, you'll be able to see that we have an overview of Faith Shared, which gives you an idea of the 6 sessions. But actually, this session structure is what we're going to talk about now. One of the things that we've tried to do with all our resources a little bit and is to have a repeated pattern and structure to how the resource works. And the idea behind this is to help people who are participating in it to become familiar and comfortable with that pattern, so they have an idea of what's coming up and they can be focusing on engaging with the questions and engaging with the ideas rather than sort of focusing on, oh, well, what are we going to be doing next? How long is this going to take? What's coming up? So this 4-part structure is introducing, expanding, exploring, and praying. So introducing is to help the group to think about what they already know about the subject. So asking them some questions around it, and we'll have a look through session 1 in a moment so you can see this in a bit more in action. Expanding is a 3 to 4 minute video covering key information and ideas for the session. So like the one we saw with Ellie, we got 5 others, 1 for each session, and that really sort of tries to take, well, in writing those, we've tried to think where people are and then give really key information for what we're going to be thinking about in the rest of the session. Exploring is digging deeper into the ideas covered in the video, and then praying is prayer led by audio reflection to help the group to pray through and reflect on what they've covered and how to apply it. And again, with the audio prayers, they're one of my favorite parts of the resource, and we've tried to we have put together a bit of a 3-part structure within that prayer, again to help people to engage with it, to know what to expect, to know what's coming up. And so the first part of the prayer is thinking about what they have been doing, what they did think about it. The middle part is their current experience of these ideas. And the third part is looking ahead to how they are going to apply these ideas in the week ahead. So in a moment, we're going to go, if we could just scroll down, and we'll have a look at session 1 in just a moment. So if we go down to session 1, you see this introducing course. So evangelism, what is evangelism? And sorry, Beth, if you could just scroll back up a second. There we go. So evangelism is, and what we've done is we've written a few different statements about what some key ideas or some popular ideas about what evangelism is. And the idea is that within your group, people sort of say whether they agree, disagree, somewhat disagree, and sort of start the conversation and hopefully give you a feel of where the group is in its feeling about evangelism. So if we scroll down, we'll just take apart a couple of those. So there's our thing. And then if we just, so evangelism is pushing my faith on others. Beth, how often have you heard evangelism described as that?
Yes, I have. And I've been at events where people have heard about who I work for and what I do and said, oh, no, not the E word.
Yeah.
It's it can conjure up images of pushing faith on others. Exactly.
Absolutely.
That. The kind of salesperson approach.
Yeah. And so that's an idea we want to get past within a lot of this stuff. And so, if we look further down, evangelism is sharing God's love with other people. Evangelism is sharing the good news of Jesus. I think these ideas of evangelism where actually we've got something good. We know a good God. We know the good things that he's done for us and the way that he's called us to him. And actually we want the people around us to experience that goodness too. And the way that we do that happens to be labeled evangelism, and that's a word that we need to do some work around. So this is sort of starting to take apart the ideas that the group already have and sort of helping them to see with fresh eyes a bit. So then if we go down a little bit within expanding, we'll see again that video that we watched with Ellie, brilliantly taking apart evangelism and evangelistes and shalom and all of that. And then exploring is, again, group activity around the E word. What do you think the wider world thinks of evangelism? So we've looked at what do we think of evangelism? What does the wider world think of evangelism? And what does the Bible tell us about what evangelism is and how to engage with it, and how, different ways of thinking about evangelism and doing evangelism. So that's what we do in exploring. And then down at the bottom, we've got this praying part. And as I said, this is, one of my favorite parts of the whole resource. And I think within courses like this, prayer is always important, but actually giving space and time to the prayer is really where we start to be prodded and poked a bit by God. I know that within my experience and my learning in these sort of spaces, I can sort of take the information in and go, all right, yep, great. I've learned some new things. I know a Greek word now. That's great. I know. It's fantastic. I can go off and do something different. And then if I just leave it there, it's like that's a new piece of information that just sort of sits in my head and doesn't really do anything. And then when I take the time to sit and pray with that, actually, that's where God says, okay, so what next? What are we going to do with this? How is this going to change you? How is this going to change what you do? And that's why we've really created these audio reflections to be, of a decent time, to give space and time for God, not for God to move. Sorry, that's the wrong way to put it. To give us space and time to listen to what God is saying to us, and to get into that space. So, like we say, there's that 4-part repeating pattern.
And then it looks like here some materials on the page as well. So a session sheet, video and audio.
Yes. So the session sheet is the page that we've just seen above. And that is there to be downloadable so that you can, and printable so that you can take it in spaces where, you might not have easy access to internet. Church buildings are not always great for, not just having Wi-Fi, but actually have, that's a great question. And we're just about to answer it actually. So really good timing. Yeah. So the session sheet is downloadable and printable and usable online. The video and audios are both downloadable. And the reason we've done that is partially for this issue of actually a lot of churches don't have an internet connection in their building. But also, even if you're running this online, say you're running it on Zoom, and you're trying to stream a video from a web page to share on your screen, and also you are running the Zoom group, your bandwidth gets clogged up very quickly and everything sort of stutters and doesn't work properly. So we've wanted to make everything downloadable so that even online, you can still download the stuff and then you can play it directly from your laptop via Zoom. Or you can go into spaces where the internet doesn't exist and have this downloaded, saved onto whatever device you have with you and playable in that space. We wanted to make this as accessible and usable in as many different spaces and contexts as possible. Fabulous.
So all of the sessions are there on the page, sessions 1 to 6, some more resources. And the link to this is on Church Army's page. So if you don't know a lot about Church Army and who we are and what we do, then do have a look around at the top there and find out a bit more about who we are. And we'd love to connect with you further.
Absolutely.
I think we can go for some questions now.
Absolutely.
So if we haven't already answered your question, do pop it in the comments there. I had some that I'd thought of that we can chat about. The first one, Johnny, being that you haven't mentioned a cost. How much is it to run?
It's totally free. All the resources available online in the space that we've just been through. In fact, Faith Pitches and Faith Shared are both completely free, available online. In Church Army, one of our values is generosity. And so we wanted this to be something that is just usable online, is usable, wherever and by anyone in any space. So we didn't want to put any barriers in the way to people getting access to this.
That's wonderful. That's good to hear. Something else that I was thinking, Johnny, was do you have any advice as to what's a good size of group to run this with? A kind of minimum or maximum?
Yeah, I suppose a minimum is probably about 3 people. 2 or 3 people, 2 people is a pair, not a group. So that's just but probably 3 people is the minimum, because then you get a good spread of opinion. You could share it in a pair if you're in that space, but actually a maximum group size is probably around 8 for one group to be able to share its ideas well. More than that, and you need to start thinking a bit more carefully about how you manage those groups and manage sharing space, because it can be very easy in a group larger than that for people to not feel comfortable sharing, or not feel that they have the expertise to share, or actually just the practicality of running in that amount, in that space, in that time can be tricky. Actually, time, that's a good thing. I didn't mention time. Each session is designed to be delivered in about an hour, but that hour involves a good amount of discussion and conversation within the group. So that's why there's one activity per per bit of the session, to really give them space to breathe and give people a chance to engage with it and really reflect on what they're doing. And as the weeks go on, the amount of material in the course reduces slightly to give a bit more space and time to the group to share their ideas. But yes, to go back to your original question, 8, or you need to start thinking about managing the group in a slightly different way.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds good. And if, say I was a church leader and I had various small groups or connect groups, house groups, cell groups, whatever we call them, could I gather those leaders to run the course? Or would that be a good way to use it?
Absolutely, that could be a really good way to do that, as long as your small groups were open to the idea of growing. This course really is aimed at helping churches to have more of an outward focus on drawing people in, and within small group context, those can be great spaces to invite people into a more informal space. We don't want everything to be about Sunday morning and drawing people to Sunday morning. We want people to be part of our communities as well, and small groups can be a great space to that. But we want, so small group leaders going through this course and thinking about how their small groups can engage in mission and evangelism within that space would be fantastic. I think that'd be an absolutely brilliant way, and I'd love to hear stories of churches doing that. If that's what you would like to do, then let us know that's what you're doing, and we'd love to hear how it goes.
Brilliant. I've really loved looking through this course, Johnny, because I feel like what we're doing is we know that all of you who are watching, you're the experts in your context. You know your community, and you know your parish, your town, your village. You know what will work and what might not work. And so what we haven't done is provide a nice, neat package, kind of outreach idea, a mission plan. We haven't done that because actually it will look different from wherever you are. We've got people here who are in Northern Ireland, who are in North Yorkshire, in Filey, someone in Gosport, someone in Oadby, and you know your place really well. Along with your leaders, you can come up with an outreach plan, a plan for sustainable mission and evangelism that will work well in your context. And so really what we've done is just provide a framework, some questions to spark the thinking, and a bit of help to kind of navigate that. So I think it's great.
Great. That's great to hear. I was having a conversation with someone earlier today actually about how some of the best places we can be creative is when we've got some parameters in place. There's nothing scarier than a blank piece of paper. And sort of sitting there with a blank piece of paper and saying, well, how are we going to reach out? Actually, we want to provide some support for that blank piece of paper. And I think that's, you've put that brilliantly, Beth. Thank you.
Yes, that's great. Another question here from Debbie. Do you think it's best to do it face-to-face or best to do it on Zoom? Or
I think my answer is it works really well in both. And I think the reason I'm saying that is not necessarily to do with the resource. It's actually to do with the people who can engage with the resource, and actually creating a space where as many people who are comfortable to do so can engage with it is the best way to go about this. So it's been designed so that it's completely usable on both, and I don't think there's one way that works better than the other. I think the results would be slightly different with the same group of people in those different contexts purely because of the context. But both would be great.
Great. And there's another question from Debbie about what do you think about it being run at a deanery level? What do you think, Johnny?
Yeah, I think that would work really well. It would just mean that thinking about sustainable mission would be slightly different depending on whether you were going to be talking about the mission outreach outworking in a parish context or in a group deanery Sorry, let me restart that sentence. If it's going to be if you're going to think about it at a deanery level and then put it into action in a parish level, then that's just an extra level of planning in there. Whereas actually, if you can put together a mission plan across a whole deanery, that's a different way of doing it. So either of those would work. It would work really well, but as long as you've got clarity about what you're trying to do as you set out to do it.
Yeah, brilliant. And we would love to hear from you, your stories of running the course, and especially the stories of mission and evangelism that come from having done this course. We'd love to hear the stories. You can get in touch with us. Johnny's email address might come on the screen, or you can get in touch with Church Army through any of our social media or through our website. So yeah, if you have any further questions or stories that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear them. So do get in touch. I think that is it for questions, and that that might be it.
Fab. As Beth said, my email address is there. Please, if you have any questions at all about this resource or any of the other resources, then drop me an email, and I will get back to you.
Wonderful. Great. Thanks, Debbie.
Great. Thanks, Debbie. That's great clarification.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been lovely to have you with us. Watch this space for further resources. And we're going to finish with the trailer video again, just to remind you what it is that we've been talking about. But thanks so much for being here, and blessings on the rest of your evening. Bye.
Is a 6-session course from Church Army, helping your church bring people together from across your church family to explore how you can relevantly share faith across your community. Perhaps your church wants to share the good news of Jesus, but isn't sure how. Or perhaps you feel a little detached from your local community and want to help bridge the gap. Maybe you're unsure of how best to use the skills and passions within your church family to share the gospel. Or maybe you're looking for ways for your church to invite people to be a part of its story.
It talks about the wholeness and oneness that we have when we accept God's love for ourselves.
Or could you put some gifts together for local shop assistants? All of these are creative ways to share God's love with the people around you.
Faith Shared has helped churches big and small from across the UK and Ireland bring together their church families to explore how they can best share faith with their communities. Plus, it's totally free, so click the link to start your Faith Shared journey today.